After my millionaire grandfather died and left me everything, my cheating ex-wife, who left me for her new lover, tried to sue me for the money. When I walked into the courtroom, my ex-wife rolled her eyes, but the judge froze. "Wait, the charges are against you?" he said. They never knew who I really was. Look, I've seen some ridiculous things in my 34 years on this planet. I've watched a guy try to microwave a burrito still wrapped in aluminum foil. I've witnessed someone parallel park for 20 minutes only to give up and take an Uber. And I once saw my college roommate attempt to iron a shirt while wearing it. But nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for the moment I walked into courtroom 3B of the Philadelphia County Courthouse and locked eyes with my ex-wife, Miranda. The eye roll she gave me wasn't just some casual ugh. No, this was a full-body experience. Her eyes didn't just roll. They did a complete gymnastics routine, stuck the landing, and probably pulled a muscle on the way back down. I'm talking Olympic-level disdain here, folks. The kind of eye roll that comes with its own dramatic soundtrack and slow-motion replay. For a split second, I genuinely thought she might injure herself, like she'd somehow sprain a cornea or detach a retina from the sheer force of her contempt. Honestly, I almost started a slow clap right there in the middle of the courtroom. It was that impressive. She was sitting at the plaintiff's table all dolled up in some power suit that probably cost more than my first car. Her perfectly highlighted hair cascading over her shoulders like she was posing for a LinkedIn headshot. Next to her sat Trent. Yes, that Trent, the gym instructor with the IQ of a protein shake, looking like he borrowed his suit from his older brother's bar mitzvah 2007. The guy had so much hair gel in that you could probably see his reflection from space, and he was doing that thing where he flexed his jaw muscles to look intimidating. Spoiler alert, it wasn't working. But here's where it gets good. Judge Harold Reynolds, a man who'd been presiding over family court cases since before I was born, looked up from the case file on his bench. He adjusted his glasses, squinted at the papers, then looked directly at me, standing there in my only decent suit, the one I'd bought specifically for Grandpa Henry's funeral 3 months ago. The judge blinked once, then twice, like his brain was trying to reboot after encountering a critical error. His mouth opened slightly, closed, then opened again, and I swear I could actually hear the Windows shutdown sound playing in his head. "Wait a minute," Judge Reynolds said slowly, his voice carrying that particular tone of confusion mixed with growing amusement. "The charges here. These allegations, they're against you." He glanced down at the file again, flipped a page like maybe he'd missed something crucial, then looked back up at me with the expression of a man who just realized the punchline to a joke he'd heard 3 days ago. "Marcus Whitmore, you're the defendant they're claiming manipulated and exploited an elderly man." I couldn't help it. A smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. "That would be me, Your Honor." The thing is, Miranda thought she had this whole situation figured out. She'd done the math in her pretty little head, probably while getting a pedicure or doing hot yoga or whatever it is people do when they have too much time and too little self-awareness. In her version of reality, she was suing her broke ex-husband, the guy who used to fix air conditioning units and unclog toilets for a living. The maintenance engineer, as I generously called myself, for what she believed was her rightful share of my late grandfather's estate. She'd probably pictured me still living in that crappy studio apartment in South Philly, still driving my 2003 Honda Civic with the duct-taped passenger mirror, still microwaving ramen noodles for dinner 4 nights a week. What she didn't know, what her smug lawyer, Richard Pike, apparently failed to properly investigate, and what was about to make this the most entertaining morning I'd had in years, was that the maintenance engineer she'd divorced 3 years ago, the guy she'd left with nothing but a sticky note and a half-empty apartment, was now the sole heir to a $30 million estate. Yeah, you read that right. $30 million with an M. The kind of money that has accountants, investment portfolios, and causes distant relatives you've never met to suddenly remember your birthday. My grandfather, Henry Whitmore, had been a Philadelphia legend. Retired Superior Court judge, real estate mogul, the guy who owned half the commercial properties in Center City, and had more connections than Verizon. He was the kind of man who wore 3-piece suits to breakfast, read 3 newspapers before lunch, and could make grown lawyers cry during cross-examination. And he was the only person in my entire life who'd ever told me something that actually stuck. "Son, keep receipts on everyone who betrays you. Not for revenge, for clarity." Smart man. Scary smart. The kind of smart that makes you nervous until you realize he's on your side. So, there I stood in this wood-paneled courtroom that smelled like old law books and broken dreams, watching my ex-wife's carefully constructed fantasy start to crumble before her eyes. I could see her lawyer frantically whispering something to her, probably trying to figure out why the judge was looking at the case file like it was written in invisible ink. Miranda's perfectly painted face had gone from smugly confident to slightly concerned. her Instagram-ready smile starting to crack around the edges. And Trent, poor dumb Trent, was just sitting there looking confused, which to be fair was pretty much his default setting. The guy probably thought estate me a type of car. I leaned slightly toward my own attorney, Lucas Shaw, a sharp guy who charged by the hour and was worth every penny, and caught Miranda's eye across the courtroom. She was staring at me now, and I could literally see the wheels turning in her head, trying to figure out why I looked so calm, why I wasn't sweating, why I seemed almost amused. That's when I couldn't resist. I gave her my best smile, the kind that doesn't quite reach your eyes. And then I shifted my gaze to Trent. He was adjusting his too tight collar, his tan looking especially orange under the fluorescent courtroom lights. I leaned just a little bit closer to Lucas, but kept my voice just loud enough to carry across the aisle. "Nice suit, Trent," I said conversationally. "Really brings out your ambition. Quick question, though. Did she pay for that, or did you manage to buy it with my alimony money?" The effect was instantaneous and beautiful. Trent's face went from spray tan orange to something resembling a sunburned tomato. His jaw clenched and he half stood from his chair before Miranda grabbed his arm and yanked him back down, hissing something that I'm pretty sure wasn't courtroom appropriate. Her lawyer shot me a death glare that could have melted steel. But Judge Reynolds, oh man. Judge Reynolds tried to hide it. He really did. He coughed into his hand, turning slightly away from the courtroom, his shoulders shaking just a little bit. When he turned back, he was wearing that expression judges wear when they're trying very hard to maintain professional decorum while internally dying of laughter. "Mr. Whitmore," the judge said, his voice carefully controlled. "Perhaps we should begin these proceedings with a bit more decorum." "Of course, Your Honor," I replied, keeping my face perfectly innocent. "My apologies. I'm just excited to be here." Lucas elbowed me gently in the ribs, but I could see him fighting back a smile, too. Miranda's lawyer cleared his throat loudly and importantly, like he was about to deliver the Gettysburg Address. "Your Honor, if we could proceed with the preliminary." "Oh, we'll proceed," Judge Reynolds interrupted, leafing through the case file again. "But I have to say, Mr. Pike, this is one of the more interesting cases I've seen cross my bench in quite some time. And I've been doing this for 27 years. That's when I absolutely definitely knew that today was going to be a beautiful day in court. The kind of day you tell stories about later. The kind that makes you believe in karma and cosmic justice and all those things people post inspirational quotes about on Facebook." Miranda was still staring at me. Her eye makeup starting to look a little less perfect. A tiny furrow appearing between her perfectly microbladed eyebrows. I could practically hear her internal monologue. Why isn't he scared? Why isn't he panicking? What does he know that I don't? Everything, sweetheart. I know everything. And as the bailiff called the court to order, and Judge Reynolds prepared to officially begin proceedings, I settled into my chair, crossed my legs comfortably, and prepared to watch the show because that's what this was going to be, a show. And unlike the past 3 years of my life, for once, I wasn't the one being played. I was about to get my favorite kind of justice, the legal kind, served with a side of poetic irony and garnished with just a hint of "I told you so." It was going to be a very good day indeed. Okay, so before we get back to watching Miranda's world implode in that courtroom, we need to rewind the tape a bit because you can't fully appreciate the sweet irony of this situation without understanding how I ended up sitting on a $30 million fortune in the first place. Trust me, this backstory is worth it. It's got everything. Family drama, unexpected plot twists, and a funeral that looked like someone had accidentally sent invitations to the entire Eastern Seaboard power structure. 3 months before that beautiful courtroom showdown, my grandfather, Henry Whitmore, passed away in his sleep at the ripe old age of 87. And when I say he was sharp until the end, I mean the man could have outnegotiated a used car salesman while simultaneously solving a crossword puzzle and critiquing your life choices. 2 days before he died, he called me to discuss municipal bond yields and to tell me that my haircut made me look like I was auditioning for a boy band. That was Grandpa Henry. Brutally honest, scary, intelligent, and somehow both your biggest critic and your fiercest defender at the same time. The funeral was absolutely insane. I'm talking about a who's who of Philadelphia society and honestly half of Pennsylvania's political infrastructure. There were 3 state senators, 2 congressmen, at least a dozen Superior Court judges, all of whom looked genuinely sad, which tells you something about how respected he was. A collection of CEOs who probably had a combined net worth that could buy a small country and enough lawyers to staff every firm from here to Pittsburgh. The parking lot at the church looked like a luxury car dealership having a convention. Mercedes, BMWs, Teslas, and one absolutely ridiculous Bentley that belonged to some real estate developer who Grandpa had apparently destroyed in court back in the 90s, but who showed up anyway to pay respects because that's just the kind of legend Henry Whitmore was. Me, I stood there in my funeral suit, the same one I was wearing in that courtroom, by the way, because I'm practical like that. Shaking hands with people who kept saying things like, "Your grandfather was an extraordinary man and he spoke so highly of you and you must be so proud to carry on his legacy." And I was proud, genuinely, completely proud because unlike most of the people in that church, I actually knew him. Not the legend, not the retired judge, not the real estate mogul. I knew Henry, the guy who taught me to play chess when I was 7, who let me stay up late watching old westerns, who told me that integrity was the only currency that actually mattered in life. You know who wasn't there? Miranda. Obviously, she was probably somewhere tropical at that exact moment, posting Instagram stories about living her truth and doing yoga on a beach with Trent, who was undoubtedly wearing one of those tank tops that's cut so low you can practically see his belly button. She'd never met Grandpa Henry. Not once in our entire 5-year marriage. And that wasn't an accident. That was a choice. Her choice specifically. See, Miranda had always been too busy for family stuff. My family stuff. Anyway, her own family gatherings, those were non-negotiable. But when I'd invite her to Sunday dinners at Grandpa's house, suddenly she had a headache or a work thing or a friend's crisis that required immediate attention. After about the 10th excuse, Grandpa had looked at me over his reading glasses and said, "Son, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. You're currently on showing number 10. I'd laughed it off back then, made excuses for her, said she was just stressed with work. Grandpa had just shrugged and gone back to his newspaper, but I caught the look in his eye. He knew. He always knew. After the funeral service, after the burial, after the endless reception where I ate approximately 17 of those tiny sandwiches that taste like nothing but somehow cost a fortune, I sat down in the office of Bernard Castellano, Grandpa's attorney for the past 40 years. Bernie was old school Philadelphia legal establishment, 3-piece suit, pocket watch, the whole 9 yards. The kind of guy who still used a fountain pen and probably had strong opinions about proper shoe shining technique. I figured this would be quick. Maybe Grandpa had left me his chess set, the one we'd played on every Sunday for 20 years. Maybe his collection of vintage watches or his law books. Or perhaps that ridiculous painting of a ship that hung in his study that he'd always joked would be mine someday. Sentimental stuff, meaningful, but not life-changing. Bernie slid a folder across his mahogany desk, the kind that's so polished you can see your reflection in it, and said with absolutely no preamble whatsoever, "Congratulations, Mr. Whitmore. You now own everything." I blinked. "I'm sorry, what? Everything?" Bernie repeated, tapping the folder. "The house, the properties, the investment portfolio, the savings accounts, the stocks, the bonds, the whole estate. Your grandfather left it all to you. Total liquid and fixed assets come to approximately $30 million, give or take, depending on the market. There are some smaller bequests to charities and his housekeeper, but the bulk of the estate. We're talking about 97% of it goes to you." For a solid 10 seconds, I just stared at him. My brain had completely blue-screened. $30 million. $30 million. That's the kind of money where you stop checking price tags at the grocery store. That's accidentally leave a $100 bill in your jeans and forget about it. Money. That's your great-great-grandkids will still be arguing about it. Money. That's I don't lie. I finally managed to stammer out, which was super articulate of me. Bernie smiled, the kind of smile that suggested he'd been waiting for this moment and was thoroughly enjoying it. He opened the folder and pulled out a handwritten letter. I recognized Grandpa's distinctive scrawl immediately. All sharp angles and confident strokes. "He wanted you to read this," Bernie said, handing it over. My hands were actually shaking as I unfolded the letter. Grandpa's handwriting, still steady even at 87, filled the page. "Marcus, if you're reading this, I'm dead. Don't be sad. 87 years is a damn good run, and I got to see you become the man I always knew you could be. Here's the thing, son. You earned this inheritance. Not by being born into the family. Not by sucking up to me. Not by showing up at the end with flowers and fake tears. You earned it by having backbone. You showed up every Sunday for 20 years, even when you had better things to do. You called me every Wednesday evening, even when I know you were exhausted from work. You sat with me in the hospital during that pneumonia scare 3 years ago, and you never once asked about my will or my money. You came because you cared, and that's rarer than you think. Everyone else in this family sees me as a bank account with a pulse. You saw me as Henry. That's worth more than all the money I made in my entire life. So here's your inheritance. Everything I built, everything I saved, everything I invested. Use it wisely. Use it well. And remember who showed up when everyone else left. That matters. That's the real currency. Love, Grandpa. I had to set the letter down because my vision had gone blurry and I absolutely was not crying in front of Bernie Castellano. I was just having an allergic reaction to the leather chairs or something. Totally normal. Bernie, bless him, pretended to be very interested in organizing papers while I pulled myself together. When I finally looked up, he was holding out a glass of whiskey. The good stuff, probably older than I was. Your grandfather left me specific instructions to give you this the moment after you read the letter, Bernie said. He said you'd need it. I took the glass and downed it in one go. It burned in the best possible way. So what now? I asked, my voice only slightly. Bernie leaned back in his chair. Now? Now you're a very wealthy man, Marcus. You'll need to make some decisions about the properties, the investments, the foundation he'd been running. But that can wait. For now, just let it sink in. Let it sink in. Right. I was a millionaire multiple times over. Me, Marcus Whitmore, the guy who'd been eating cereal for dinner twice a week just 6 months ago because it was cheap and easy. The maintenance engineer who'd spent 5 years being told by his wife that he'd never amount to anything special. The grandson who just showed up because that's what you do for people you love. I drove home that night in my beat-up Honda Civic, which suddenly felt extremely ironic, and sat in my crappy studio apartment, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like Abraham Lincoln. And I laughed. I laughed until my sides hurt, until tears were streaming down my face, until my neighbor banged on the wall and yelled at me to keep it down. Because if only Grandpa Henry knew how absolutely, devastatingly perfect his timing was. If only he could see what was coming in 3 months. If only he knew that his letter, that beautiful, perfect letter about showing up and having backbone would be the most prophetic thing he'd ever written. The universe has a sense of humor after all. And apparently, it was on my side for once. So, there I was, 30 days into being secretly rich. And let me tell you, it's a weird experience. I hadn't told anyone yet. Not my coworkers, not my neighbors, definitely not the barista at the coffee shop who still gave me the struggling millennial discount without me asking. I was still living in my studio apartment with Abraham Lincoln on the ceiling, still driving my Honda with the janky side mirror, still buying the store brand everything at the grocery store because old habits die hard. And also because I genuinely couldn't process that I could now afford name brand cereal without checking my bank account first. Bernie had advised me to take it slow, figure out what I wanted to do with my life. Now that money wasn't a constant source of anxiety, so I kept going to work, kept fixing HVAC units and unclogging toilets, kept living my regular life while sitting on a fortune that would make most people's heads explode. It was kind of fun, actually, like being a superhero with a secret identity, except instead of fighting crime, I was just really good at replacing water heaters. I was in the middle of eating leftover Chinese food straight from the container. Living that glamorous millionaire lifestyle obviously when my phone rang. Lucas Shaw's name popped up on the screen and I answered with my mouth full of Lane because I'm classy like that. Marcus, Lucas said, and his tone made me stop chewing immediately. He sounded somewhere between amused and concerned, which is a very specific lawyer tone that usually means someone's done something spectacularly stupid. I need you to sit down. I'm already sitting, I said, swallowing quickly. What's wrong? Is it the estate? Did something happen with the properties? No, nothing like that. The estate is fine. It's just, he paused, and I could hear papers rustling on his end. I got served this morning with a lawsuit against you. I almost dropped my phone into my lane. What? Who's suing me for what? Your ex-wife. Time stopped. I mean, not literally, but you know that feeling when your brain just completely freezes and you can't process words anymore? Yeah, that happened. I sat there holding my phone, a noodle hanging from my chopsticks, my mouth opening and closing like a goldfish that had suddenly developed existential dread. I'm sorry, I finally managed. Did you just say Miranda is suing me? Miranda Coleman. My ex-wife Miranda, the woman who left me 3 years ago for a guy whose entire personality is protein powder. That's the one, Lucas confirmed. And I could hear the barely suppressed amusement in his voice. And wait, it gets better. She's suing you for fraud, undue influence, and elder exploitation. What? I actually shouted that, and my neighbor banged on the wall again. I lowered my voice to an aggressive whisper. For what? Fraud? What could I have possibly defrauded her of her Netflix password? Because she changed that when she left, so that ship has sailed. Lucas was definitely laughing now. She and Mr. Trent Davis are claiming that you manipulated your grandfather, Henry Whitmore, into leaving you his entire estate. They're alleging that you isolated him from his family, took advantage of his advanced age, and supposedly declining mental faculties, and essentially conned an elderly man out of $30 million. I sat there in stunned silence for a solid 15 seconds. Then I started laughing. Not a normal laugh, a hysterical, borderline unhinged laugh that probably confirmed to my neighbors that I'd finally lost it. "Let me get this straight," I said when I could finally breathe again. Miranda, who never met my grandfather, who refused to attend a single family dinner in 5 years of marriage, who couldn't even be bothered to send a sympathy card when he died, is now claiming that I isolated him from his family. That appears to be the crux of their argument. Yes. His family. What family? Grandpa hadn't spoken to anyone except me since like 2001 because everyone else bored him to tears. His own son, my dad, moved to Arizona and calls once a year on Christmas. His brother died in 1998. Who exactly am I supposed to have isolated him from? The mailman. I'm just reading what the complaint says. Marcus and Trent. Trent is involved in this. The guy who thinks his state is a type of car is filing a lawsuit about a state law. He's listed as a co-plaintiff. Apparently, they're engaged now. So, he's claiming some kind of honestly, I'm not even sure what he's claiming. The legal argument is pretty thin. Actually, calling it thin is generous. It's basically transparent. I pinched the bridge of my nose trying to process this absolute insanity. When did she file this? It's dated 3 days ago. I got served this morning. 3 days ago, I repeated slowly. Lucas, 3 days ago, Miranda posted on Instagram about new beginnings with the love of my life. I know because my cousin sent me a screenshot with like 15 laughing emojis. She posted a picture of her and Trent on a boat with champagne with some caption about manifestation and living her best life. So, she filed a lawsuit claiming emotional damages and family trauma. The same week she posted vacation photos. Lucas said dryly, "That's certainly a choice." That's not a choice. That's evidence of a complete break from reality. I stood up, started pacing my tiny apartment, which took approximately 4 steps in any direction. How did she even find out about the inheritance? Public records? Probably. Estate filings are publicly accessible, and your grandfather's passing made the papers. Once his will went through probate, anyone could look it up if they knew where to look. So, she went digging. Appears that way. I laughed again, but this time it was the cold kind. The kind that comes when you realize someone you used to love has turned into someone you don't even recognize. She left me when I had nothing. Literally nothing. She walked out with a sticky note. Lucas, a sticky note that said, "You're a good man, but I need passion." Now, suddenly, she finds out I inherited money. And she's what? Crawling back, filing lawsuits. What's her endgame here? Best guess, she either wants a settlement to go away quietly, or she actually thinks she can convince a judge that she's entitled to a portion of your inheritance. Based on what legal principle, though, I regret my life choices clause. I've seen people try to win cases on less, Lucas admitted. But Marcus, between you and me, this is a garbage lawsuit. It's going to get tossed. She has no standing, no evidence. And from what you've told me about your relationship with your grandfather, she has absolutely no case whatsoever. So why is she doing this? Because people get weird about money, especially large amounts of money, and especially when they feel like they somehow deserve it. I thought about that for a moment about Miranda sitting in whatever overpriced apartment she and Trent were renting, scrolling through public records, seeing those numbers, doing the math, realizing that if she'd stuck around just a little bit longer, if she'd faked interest in my family for just a few more years, she could have been sitting on millions instead of splitting rent with a guy whose career peaked at fitness boot camp instructor. When's the first hearing? I asked. 2 weeks. Wednesday morning, 9 a.m. Judge Harold Reynolds presiding. Reynolds? I know that name. Wasn't he friends with Grandpa? Colleagues? Yes. They served on the bench together back in the 90s. I already checked. He doesn't have to recuse himself since he's not personally involved in the estate, but he definitely knew your grandfather professionally. A slow smile spread across my face. So Miranda is going to stand in front of a judge who actually knew Henry Whitmore and try to claim that I manipulated him. That does appear to be her strategy. Yes, Lucas. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And I once watched Trent try to open a door that clearly said pull for a full minute. Lucas laughed. I'm not worried about the case, Marcus. It's frivolous, and any competent judge will see that immediately. I just wanted to give you a heads up that this is happening and to prepare yourself for seeing her in court. Oh, I'm prepared, I said, and I meant it. Trust me, I'm very prepared. After I hung up, I sat back down on my couch and finished my lo mein, which had gone cold, but I ate it anyway because wasting food is a sin. And also, I was too distracted to care. I thought about Miranda and Trent, probably celebrating right now, probably convinced they'd found some brilliant loophole, some way to cash in on my good fortune. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly know, was that Grandpa Henry had prepared me for exactly this kind of situation. He'd warned me about people who only show up when there's something in it for them. He'd taught me to document everything, to keep records, to never assume that people wouldn't surprise you with their greed. I walked over to my closet and pulled out a box I'd been keeping since the divorce. Inside were 3 years' worth of receipts, text messages I'd backed up, emails, calendar entries. Every time Miranda had canceled on a family dinner. Every excuse she'd made. Every time she'd asked Grandpa for money and then ghosted him when he said no. Every screenshot of every social media post she'd made while claiming to be too overwhelmed to meet my family. Grandpa had told me, keep receipts on everyone who betrays you. Well, Miranda, I thought, setting the box on my kitchen counter. I kept every single one. 2 weeks suddenly felt very, very far away. All right, so before we get to the absolute massacre that was about to happen in that courtroom, I need to give you the full backstory on my marriage to Miranda, because you can't truly appreciate the poetic justice of what's coming without understanding just how spectacularly she played herself. And trust me, this woman wrote, directed, and starred in her own downfall, and she doesn't even know the final act yet. I met Miranda Coleman 7 years ago at a coffee shop in Rittenhouse Square, back when I was still trying to convince myself that my computer repair business was going to take off any day now. Spoiler alert, it did not take off. In fact, it crashed and burned so hard I'm pretty sure the wreckage is still smoking somewhere. But anyway, I was sitting there with my laptop trying to figure out why Mrs. Henderson's desktop kept blue screening when this absolutely gorgeous woman sat down at the table next to me and ordered something complicated involving oat milk and 3 different syrups. She had that look, you know, the one where everything about her screamed I'm low maintenance, but you could tell she spent 2 hours getting ready. The messy bun that took 15 minutes to perfect. Then natural makeup that required 12 products. The yoga pants that cost more than my rent. But she smiled at me, commented on my vintage Phillies t-shirt. And somehow we ended up talking for 3 hours about absolutely nothing important. I love that you're so passionate about helping people with their technology problems, she'd said, tilting her head in that way that probably worked on every guy she'd ever met. It's so humble. You have such a beautiful, grounded spirit. Humble. Grounded. Looking back, those were red flags bigger than the ones they fly at the beach when there's a hurricane coming. But I was 27 and stupid, and she was paying attention to me. So I ignored every single warning sign my brain tried to send. Translation of what she actually meant. I think you're a broke loser who will be easy to control and won't question me when I max out your credit cards. We dated for 6 months before I proposed because apparently I was speedrunning bad decisions that year. The wedding was small. My family, her family, a few friends, and about 40 people on her side that I'd never met and would never see again. Grandpa Henry came, wore his best suit, shook my hand, and pulled me aside before the ceremony. Son, he said quietly. Are you absolutely sure about this? Of course, I'd said, confused. I love her, Grandpa. He'd looked at me for a long moment, and I could see him choosing his words carefully. Love is important, but pay attention to how someone treats people who can't do anything for them. That tells you who they really are. I'd laughed it off, told him he was being overprotective, promised him he'd love Miranda once he got to know her better. He just nodded, kissed me on the forehead like he used to when I was a kid, and said, I hope you're right. Narrator voice, I was not right. The first year of marriage was fine, or at least I thought it was fine, which in retrospect means it definitely wasn't fine, and I was just oblivious. Miranda worked as a social media consultant, which as far as I could tell meant she took selfies and called it market research. I was still doing computer repair and had just picked up some maintenance work on the side to make ends meet because, surprise, fixing computers for old people who keep clicking on email scams doesn't actually pay very well. But Miranda had expensive taste. Designer purses, premium gym memberships, monthly spa appointments, a skincare routine that required more products than a CVS checkout line. And somehow, despite her consulting business, I was the one paying for all of it. Babe, I need this moisturizer, she'd say, holding up a tiny jar that cost $140. It's an investment in my skin health. That's like a week of groceries, I'd point out. Don't be cheap, Marcus. Self-care isn't selfish, right? Self-care. That's what we were calling burning through my paycheck before the bills were paid. Every Sunday, I'd go to Grandpa's house for dinner. It was our thing. Had been since I was a teenager. We'd play chess, argue about politics, watch whatever game was on, just hang out. And every Sunday, I'd invite Miranda. I can't this week, babe. I have a headache. I promised Chloe I'd help her with something. I'm so stressed with work. I just need to decompress. Your grandfather is kind of intimidating, you know. I just need more time. Excuse after excuse after excuse. For 5 years, she came to maybe 3 Sunday dinners total, and 2 of those were Christmas and Thanksgiving when she basically had no choice. She never called him, never asked about him, acted like my family was some kind of inconvenient obligation that interfered with her real life. Meanwhile, she expected me to attend every single one of her family events. Her mom's birthday, her dad's retirement party, her cousin's baby shower, her aunt's book club. I showed up to all of them, smiled, made small talk, pretended I enjoyed listening to her mother explain for the 15th time how Miranda could have been a model if she'd wanted to. Year 3 was when Trent entered the picture, though I didn't know it at the time. Miranda suddenly needed a gym membership to the fanciest fitness center in Philadelphia, the kind where they have eucalyptus-scented towels and water with cucumber slices. She started going every morning at 6 a.m., which should have been my first clue because Miranda had never voluntarily woken up before 9 in her entire life. I'm just really getting into fitness, she'd say, wearing matching workout sets that cost more than my car payment. It's important to prioritize health. She started talking about this amazing trainer who was really helping her reach her goals. Trent this, Trent that. Trent says high-intensity intervals are the key to metabolic health. Trent recommended this protein powder. Trent thinks I should try hot yoga. I'm not an idiot. I mean, clearly I was a bit of an idiot or I would have seen this coming. But even I started to notice that she was spending more time talking about her trainer than she was talking to me. She'd come home from the gym all energized and glowing, then barely acknowledge me for the rest of the day. Maybe you should work out with us sometime, she suggested once, which was hilarious because I was working 60-hour weeks fixing air conditioners and hauling equipment upstairs. I was getting plenty of exercise. Thanks. I'm good, I'd said. But maybe you could skip one session and come to Grandpa's for dinner this week. He's been asking about you. She'd rolled her eyes. Practice for the Olympic-level performance she'd given the courtroom 3 years later and said, Marcus, your grandfather barely knows I exist. Stop trying to guilt-trip me. That stung, mainly because it was partially true. Grandpa barely knew she existed because she'd never given him the chance to know her. Year 4 was when things really started falling apart. Miranda's consulting business somehow required more and more funding, but produced fewer and fewer results. She needed a new laptop, a ring light, a professional camera, editing software, a website, business cards made from recycled bamboo, or some nonsense. I was paying for everything, working 2 jobs, exhausted all the time, while she posted Instagram stories about building her empire and manifesting abundance. Meanwhile, my relationship with Grandpa was the only thing keeping me sane. Every Sunday, without fail, I'd show up. Sometimes I'd be so tired I could barely keep my eyes open, but I'd go anyway because that's what you do for people you love. We'd play chess. He won probably 70% of the time. And he'd ask me how I was really doing. Not the polite version, but the truth. Marriage is hard. I'd admit sometimes, but we're working on it. He'd nod, move his knight, and say something like, son, you can't work on a marriage alone. Takes 2 people showing up. I'd deflect, make excuses, change the subject, but he was right. He was always right. Year 5, Miranda's best friend, Chloe, let something slip at a barbecue. We were all a few drinks in, and she made a comment about how it must be nice that Miranda's finally found someone who matches her energy. What do you mean? I'd asked. Chloe's face had gone white. Oh, I just meant, you know, with her fitness journey and everything. But I knew in that moment, I absolutely knew. All those early morning gym sessions, all that talk about Trent, all the time she'd come home late because she lost track of time doing cardio. It wasn't cardio. Well, technically maybe it was, but not the kind that happens on a treadmill. I didn't confront her right away. I watched, paid attention, noticed things I'd been ignoring. The way she hit her phone screen, the way she'd smile at texts and then quickly delete them. The new lingerie that I never saw her wear around me. The excuses about being tired whenever I tried to initiate anything physical. One morning, I woke up to find a sticky note on the bathroom mirror. Not even a real conversation, not even the decency of a face-to-face breakup, just a yellow post. It note stuck next to the toothpaste holder. Marcus, you're a good man, but I need passion. I need someone who understands me on a deeper level. I'm moving out today while you're at work. I hope you find happiness. That was it. 5 years of marriage summarized in 4 sentences on a 3-inch square of paper. No explanation, no apology, Nothing about the 5 years I'd supported her dreams while mine died on the vine. Nothing about the credit card debt she'd left me with. Nothing about the fact that she'd been cheating on me for at least a year. I called Grandpa. Didn't even say hello. Just she left. "I'm sorry, son," he said quietly. "Come over. Bring whatever you need." I stayed with him for 2 months while I got myself together, found a new apartment, started rebuilding my life. He never said, "I told you so." Never lectured me. Just let me heal. And told me the same thing over and over. Don't chase people who run towards stupidity. Best advice I ever got. And now, 3 years later, here we were. Miranda had chosen Trent, chosen his abs over my reliability, chosen passion over partnership. And I'd chosen to move forward, to keep showing up for the people who mattered, to maintain my integrity even when it would have been easier to become bitter. The universe was about to reward one of those choices and punish the other. Karma, as it turns out, has perfect timing. So, there we were back in courtroom 3B, and let me tell you, the energy in that room was absolutely electric. You know that feeling you get right before something spectacular is about to happen. Like when you're watching a cooking competition and someone's soule is clearly about to collapse. Or when you see someone confidently walking toward a glass door they think is open. That beautiful moment of anticipation before disaster strikes. Yeah, that's exactly what this felt like. Except I was the only one who knew the disaster was coming. Miranda and Trent sat at the plaintiff's table looking like they'd just won the lottery and were waiting for someone to hand them the oversized check. Miranda had gone full power woman with her outfit, a navy pants suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, hair blown out to perfection, makeup applied with the precision of someone who'd watched approximately 400 YouTube tutorials. She looked like she was about to give a TED talk on manifesting success through positive vibrations or whatever nonsense she was into these days. Trent, bless his heart, was wearing a suit that fit him about as well as I'd fit into a pair of skinny jeans. The shoulders were too tight, the pants were too short, and he kept tugging at his collar like it was personally attacking him. His hair was gelled within an inch of its life, giving him that wet look that guys think makes them look sophisticated, but actually makes them look like they just emerged from a swimming pool. He was also wearing cologne. I could smell it from across the room. Some aggressive scent that probably had a name like Alpha Predator or Extreme Masculine Force. Their lawyer, Richard Pike, was exactly what you'd picture when you think of a sleazy attorney who advertises on bus benches. Mid-50s spray tan that was just a shade too orange, teeth so white they were practically glowing, in a suit that screamed I peaked in 1997 and I'm still coasting on that energy. He had one of those faces that's permanently set to smug, like he was constantly thinking about how clever he was even when he absolutely wasn't. Lucas leaned over to me as we watched Pike dramatically arrange his papers on the table, making a big show of everything like he was preparing to argue in front of the Supreme Court instead of a routine family court hearing. $20 says he opens with a quote, Lucas whispered. No bet, I whispered back. Guys like that always open with a quote. Probably something about justice or truth that he found on brainyquote.com. Judge Reynolds entered and we all stood. He settled into his chair, adjusted his glasses, and surveyed the courtroom with the expression of a man who'd seen every possible variation of human stupidity and was perpetually unimpressed by all of it. His eyes lingered on me for just a moment, and I swear I saw the tiniest hint of recognition. He'd known Grandpa. He knew what kind of man Henry Whitmore was. This was already not going to go well for Miranda, and she had absolutely no idea. Be seated, Judge Reynolds said. Let's begin. Mr. Pike, I understand you're representing the plaintiffs. Pike stood up so fast I'm surprised he didn't give himself whiplash. He buttoned his jacket, which didn't need buttoning, straightened his tie, which didn't need straightening, and cleared his throat with the kind of dramatic flair usually reserved for Shakespeare in the Park. Yes, Your Honor, I am. And if I may, I'd like to begin by reminding this courtroom that we are here today because justice, as the great Martin Luther King Jr. once said as I leaned over to Lucas, called it what love looks like in public, and my clients, Your Honor, have been denied justice. They have been victimized by a calculated manipulative scheme designed to exploit an elderly man in his most vulnerable moments. I had to physically bite my tongue to keep from laughing. Grandpa Henry vulnerable. The man had literally negotiated a real estate deal from his hospital bed during that pneumonia scare. He'd once made a lawyer cry during a deposition just by raising one eyebrow. Calling him vulnerable was like calling a great white shark cuddly. Pike was on a roll now, pacing in front of the judge's bench like he was performing for an invisible audience. Your Honor, my client, Miss Miranda Coleman, was married to the defendant for 5 years. 5 years of devotion, of partnership, of building a life together. And during that time, the defendant systematically isolated his grandfather from his family, from his loved ones, from anyone who might question his growing influence over the elderly man's affairs. Judge Reynolds was writing something down, his expression completely neutral. I couldn't tell if he was taking actual notes or just doodling to maintain his sanity. The defendant, Pike continued, and I noticed he was very carefully not using my name. Probably some lawyer trick to dehumanize me. Used his position as the primary caregiver. Objection, Lucas said calmly, not even standing up. Mr. Whitmore was never his grandfather's primary caregiver. Henry Whitmore lived independently in his own home with occasional assistance from a part-time housekeeper until 2 weeks before his death. Sustained, Judge Reynolds said, Mr. Pike, stick to facts that are actually in evidence. Pike's jaw tightened, but he recovered quickly. Very well. The defendant maintained an unusually close relationship with his grandfather, visiting him weekly. Weekly visits with a family member are unusual. Judge Reynolds interrupted, looking up from his notes. I must have missed that memo. A few people in the gallery, mostly court staff and a couple of lawyers waiting for other cases, snickered. Pike's face was turning red, which clashed spectacularly with his orange spray tan, creating a color palette that can only be described as Halloween nightmare. What I mean, Your Honor, is that the defendant leveraged this relationship to gain undue influence over his grandfather's estate planning. He deliberately excluded Ms. Coleman from family gatherings, prevented her from forming a relationship with Mr. Henry Whitmore and ultimately manipulated the elderly man into leaving him the entire $30 million estate. Objection, Lucas said, this time standing up. Your Honor, the plaintiff was never excluded from anything. In fact, Mr. Marcus Whitmore has documentation showing repeated invitations to family dinners, all of which the plaintiff declined. We'll get to evidence in due course, Judge Reynolds said. Mr. Pike, do you have anything else for your opening statement, or are we done with the theatrical portion of the morning? I love this judge already. Pike, clearly flustered that his dramatic performance wasn't having the desired effect, wrapped up quickly. Your Honor, we will prove that the defendant is not entitled to this inheritance, that it was obtained through fraud and manipulation, and that my clients deserve compensation for the emotional and financial damages they have suffered. He sat down and Miranda reached over to squeeze his arm, giving him an encouraging smile like he just delivered the Gettysburg Address instead of a barely coherent conspiracy theory. Then it was Miranda's turn to testify. And oh boy, this was where things got really entertaining. She took the stand wearing an expression of practiced sadness, the kind you see in those pharmaceutical commercials where they're trying to sell you antidepressants. She placed her hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth. Irony was working overtime today and settled into the witness chair like she was preparing for a magazine interview about overcoming adversity. Pike started with softball questions. How long were you married? 5 years. Did you love the defendant? Very much. How would you describe your relationship with his family? I tried so hard to be part of his family, but Marcus, he made it very difficult. I nearly choked. Lucas put a hand on my arm, a silent reminder to stay calm and let them dig their own grave. Can you elaborate on that? Pike asked, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. Miranda took a deep breath. And I swear to God, she actually managed to make her eyes well up. Or had she learned to cry on command? Was there a class, a YouTube tutorial? Marcus was very protective of his grandfather, almost possessive. Whenever I suggested visiting him, Marcus would make excuses. He said his grandfather was tired or busy or not feeling well. He made me feel like I wasn't welcome. This was amazing. She was literally rewriting history in real time and she was doing it under oath. And how did this make you feel? Pike asked. Because apparently we were in therapy now instead of a courtroom. Excluded. Hurt. Like I wasn't good enough to be part of his family. A single tear rolled down her cheek. Oscar worthy. Honestly, I just wanted to know his grandfather. I wanted to be a good granddaughter-in-law. But Marcus kept me at a distance. And do you believe this was intentional? I do. Now looking back, I realize he was isolating his grandfather so that he could manipulate him without anyone questioning it. He turned Henry against me against everyone. So that when it came time to write the will, there was no one left to inherit except Marcus. The way she said Grandpa's first name like they'd been close, like she had any right to use it familiarly made my blood boil. She'd never earned that right. She'd never even tried. Pike nodded solemnly. And during your marriage, did the defendant ever discuss his grandfather's finances with you? All the time. He was obsessed with the idea that his grandfather was wealthy. He'd talk about the properties, the investments, what everything might be worth someday. It was uncomfortable, honestly, like he was waiting for his grandfather to die. I felt Lucas tense beside me. That was a dangerous accusation, the kind that could actually do damage if a jury believed it. But this wasn't a jury trial. It was just Judge Reynolds, and he was watching Miranda with the expression of someone listening to a sales pitch for a timeshare. No further questions, Pike said, sitting down with a satisfied smile. Now came the fun part. Lucas stood up, took his time walking to the podium, and smiled pleasantly at Miranda. She smiled back, probably thinking she'd nailed her performance, and this was just a formality. "Miss Coleman," Lucas began, his voice friendly and conversational. "You testified that you wanted to visit Mr. Henry Whitmore, but that my client prevented you from doing so. Is that correct?" "Yes, that's right. And you said this happened frequently throughout your 5-year marriage." "Yes." Lucas nodded like this was all making perfect sense. "So just to be clear, you're saying that you actively wanted to spend time with your husband's elderly grandfather to build a relationship with him, but you were prevented from doing so." "Exactly." "Interesting." Lucas picked up a piece of paper from his table. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit Exhibit A into evidence." This was it. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. Lucas stood there holding Exhibit A like it was the Holy Grail, and I could see Miranda's confidence starting to crack just a little bit around the edges. Her smile was still plastered on, but there was something in her eyes now, a tiny flicker of uncertainty, like she was suddenly remembering that actions have consequences and lies have receipts. "Miss Coleman," Lucas continued in that same pleasant conversational tone that somehow made everything he said sound more devastating. "Before we get to this exhibit, I just want to clarify something. You said you've been with Mr. Trent Davis since your fitness boot camp. When exactly did you start attending that boot camp?" Miranda blinked, clearly not expecting that question. "I'm not sure of the exact date. Let me help you remember. According to your own Instagram posts, which are public, by the way, you posted your first photo at Elite Fitness Philadelphia on March 15, 4 years ago. Does that sound right?" I suppose so. "Yes. And you filed for divorce from my client on July 22, 3 years ago. Correct?" "Yes. So, that's roughly 16 months between when you met Mr. Davis and when you left my client. Does that timeline sound accurate?" You could see the math happening behind her eyes. See her trying to figure out where this was going and how bad it was going to be. "I guess so, but I don't see what that has to." "We'll get there," Lucas said smoothly. "Now, you testified that you wanted to visit Mr. Henry Whitmore, but my client prevented you. I'm holding here a copy of text message exchanges between you and Mr. Marcus Whitmore. These are from your phone records, which we were able to subpoena. May I approach, Your Honor?" Judge Reynolds nodded, and Lucas handed copies to the judge to Pike and kept one for himself. I watched Miranda's face go from tan to pale in about 3 seconds flat. She knew what was in those texts. She knew exactly what was coming. "Let me read a few of these aloud if I may." Lucas said, "This is from September 10, 6 years ago. My client texts you. Grandpa asked if you wanted to come to dinner Sunday. Says he makes the best lasagna in Philadelphia and wants to prove it to you. Your response, can't babe getting my hair done. Tell him rain check." Miranda shifted in her seat. "I was busy that day." "Oh, we have more." Lucas interrupted cheerfully. "October 3, same year. My client. Grandpa's birthday dinner this Sunday at 6. Would mean a lot if you came." Your response? "Birthday dinners are so boring. Can we just send a card?" A few people in the gallery gasped. Even Trent looked uncomfortable, which was impressive because I didn't think he had the emotional range to feel secondhand embarrassment. Lucas flipped a page. November 20. My client, Thanksgiving at Grandpa's. He's really looking forward to meeting you. Your response? "Do we have to? I already committed to my family's thing." "Those texts are out of context," Miranda said, her voice rising slightly. "You can't just context." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "Let's talk about context, then. Your Honor, I have here a complete record of every invitation my client extended to Miss Coleman over their 5-year marriage. In total, he invited her to 53 Sunday dinners, 7 holidays for birthdays, and 1 hospital visit when Mr. Whitmore had pneumonia. She attended 3 Sunday dinners, 2 of which were mandatory holidays, and 0 of everything else." Judge Reynolds was reading through the text messages, and his expression had gone from neutral to something resembling barely controlled annoyance. "Miss Coleman, these messages appear to directly contradict your earlier testimony." "I can explain," Miranda started. But Lucas wasn't done. "Actually, Your Honor, it gets better or worse, depending on your perspective. May I present Exhibit B?" Oh man, this was the good stuff. Lucas pulled out a stack of printouts that looked like they'd come from social media, and I knew exactly what they were because I'd helped him compile them. Every single Instagram post, Facebook check-in, and Twitter update Miranda had made during times when she'd claimed to be too busy or too tired to visit Grandpa. "This is from the same day as that September 10 text," Lucas said, holding up a printout. "The day Miss Coleman said she couldn't come to dinner because she was getting her hair done." Here's her Instagram post from that evening. Girls' night at Coda. Best cocktails in the city. Complete with a photo of her at a bar with 6 friends. Timestamp 7:45 p.m. Miranda's lawyer jumped up. Objection. This is social media stalking? It's publicly available information, Lucas said calmly. Miss Coleman chose to post these photos publicly. I'm simply providing evidence that contradicts her testimony. Overruled, Judge Reynolds said. And he actually sounded interested now. Continue, Mr. Shaw. Lucas went through post after post, each one more damning than the last. The time she said she had a migraine, but posted pictures from a wine tasting. The time she claimed to be working on a major project, but checked into a spa for a full day of treatments. The Thanksgiving she skipped because of her family's thing that turned out to be a weekend trip to Miami with Trent. Yeah, that one raised some eyebrows. And here's my personal favorite, Lucas said, holding up another printout. This is from April 12, 2 years ago. My client invited Ms. Coleman to the hospital because his grandfather had pneumonia and the doctors weren't sure he'd make it through the night. Her response, and I quote, "That's really sad, but I can't handle hospital vibes right now. Send him my love." The courtroom was dead silent. Even the stenographer had stopped typing and was just staring at Miranda with open disgust. That same night, Lucas continued, Miss Coleman posted this photo to Instagram, "Date night with my king," featuring her and Mr. Davis at an expensive steakhouse. My client was at the hospital holding his grandfather's hand, thinking he might die, and Miss Coleman was taking selfies with her personal trainer. That's enough, Pike shouted, standing up so fast his chair rolled backward. Your Honor, this is character assassination. None of this is relevant, too. It's extremely relevant. Lucas shot back. The plaintiff claims she was excluded from the family and prevented from forming a relationship with Mr. Whitmore. I'm proving that she actively chose not to participate repeatedly and consistently for years. You can't claim someone isolated you from a relationship you never wanted in the first place. Judge Reynolds held up a hand. Mr. Pike, sit down. The objection is overruled. Mr. Shaw, proceed. Miranda was crying now, but these weren't the pretty controlled tears from earlier. These were real tears, mascara running, face-crumpling tears of someone who'd just realized they'd been caught in a massive lie under oath. Lucas walked back to our table, picked up another folder, and returned to the podium. Now, Miss Coleman, let's talk about your relationship with Mr. Trent Davis. You testified that you've known him for 4 years, correct? Yes, she whispered. And when did your romantic relationship with him begin? After my divorce. After. Are you sure about that? Silence. Because I have here screenshots from a backup Instagram account you maintained under the username FitQueenAdventures. Private account. Only 47 followers. But one of those followers was your friend Chloe, who was very cooperative when we explained this was for a legal proceeding. Miranda looked like she was going to throw up. Trent had gone completely white. His spray tea the only thing giving him any color. Lucas held up printout after printout. Miranda and Trent at the gym kissing in the parking lot. Dated 8 months before the divorce. Miranda and Trent at a hotel captioned weekend getaway with my person dated 6 months before the divorce. Miranda and Trent at the beach. Clearly couple. Why? Dated 4 months before the divorce. So, let me ask you again, Miss Coleman, and remember you're under oath, Lucas said quietly. When did your romantic relationship with Mr. Davis begin? She couldn't speak. She literally couldn't form words. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Your Honor, Lucas said. I think the evidence speaks for itself. The plaintiff committed perjury when she claimed to want a relationship with Mr. Whitmore. She committed perjury when she claimed my client isolated her. And she just committed perjury when she claimed her relationship with Mr. Davis began after the divorce. Everything about this case is based on lies. I have more, Lucas said. And I loved how calm he sounded, like he was ordering coffee instead of systematically destroying someone's credibility. Miss Coleman, do you remember asking Mr. Henry Whitmore for money? I never, Miranda started. Exhibit C, Lucas said, holding up more papers. Text messages between Ms. Coleman and Mr. Henry Whitmore. The phone number is confirmed to be his. These messages show Ms. Coleman reaching out to Mr. Whitmore directly, bypassing my client entirely on 6 separate occasions. Let me read one. Hi, Henry. Marcus talks about you all the time. I'm starting a skincare line and looking for investors. Would love to chat about opportunities. Judge Reynolds looked up sharply. She contacted him directly asking for money. Multiple times, Your Honor. And each time Mr. Whitmore politely declined, and each time she stopped responding to his messages. He invited her to lunch 3 times after these exchanges. She never responded. He invited her to Christmas dinner. No response. The only time Miss Coleman showed any interest in communicating with Mr. Whitmore was when she wanted financial backing. This is absurd. Pike finally found his voice. These messages could be there authenticated, Lucas said flatly. Phone records, timestamps, metadata, everything. Would you like me to call in a digital forensics expert to testify? Because I brought one and he's waiting outside. Pike sat down defeated. Lucas turned back to Miranda. So, just to summarize, you never wanted a relationship with Mr. Whitmore. You repeatedly declined invitations. You were cheating on my client for at least a year before the divorce. You only contacted Mr. Whitmore when you wanted money, and you're now claiming you deserve part of an inheritance from a man you couldn't be bothered to visit, even once when he was dying. Is that accurate? Miranda was full-on sobbing now. We needed. It's not fair that Marcus gets everything. Life isn't fair, Miss Coleman. Judge Reynolds said coldly. But the law is, and the law says you have no claim to this estate. The judge looked at Pike with an expression that could freeze hell. Counselor, is there anything else or are we done wasting the court's time? Pike stood up weakly. No, Your Honor. Good, because I have some things to say. After watching Lucas absolutely demolish Miranda's entire case with the legal equivalent of a tactical nuke, Judge Reynolds called a 15-minute recess. I think he needed time to compose himself and figure out how to professionally express what probably translated to, "Are you freaking kidding me with this nonsense?" Improper legal language. Miranda practically ran out of the courtroom, Trent following behind her like a confused golden retriever who just realized his owner was actually terrible. Pike gathered his papers with the energy of a man contemplating early retirement and perhaps a career change to something less soul-crushing, like being a DMV employee or a phone company customer service representative. Lucas and I stayed seated. He was making notes, completely calm, while I was trying to process the fact that I just watched my ex-wife commit perjury multiple times and then get caught in spectacular fashion. That went well, Lucas said without looking up from his legal pad. That was beautiful, I replied. I mean, I knew we had the evidence, but watching you actually use it, that was like watching a master chef work, except instead of food, you were serving justice with a side of humiliation. Wait until you testify, Lucas said. That's when we really drive it home. When we reconvened, the energy in the courtroom had completely shifted. Miranda looked like she'd been crying in the bathroom. Her makeup was smudged, her eyes were red, and she'd lost that artificial confidence she'd walked in with. Trent looked like he was seriously reconsidering his life choices, which to be fair, he should have been doing for the past 4 years. Pike looked like he wanted to be literally anywhere else on the planet. Judge Reynolds settled back into his seat and looked directly at Lucas. Mr. Shaw, does the defense wish to call any witnesses? Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Marcus Whitmore. This was it. My moment to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, which was going to be way more satisfying than I'd imagined. I stood up, walked to the witness stand, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore the oath. The same oath Miranda had sworn about 30 minutes ago before lying her face off. The difference was I actually meant it. Lucas started with the basics. Mr. Whitmore, can you tell the court about your relationship with your grandfather, Henry Whitmore? I took a deep breath and looked directly at Judge Reynolds. Not at Miranda, not at her lawyer, just at the judge who'd known Grandpa and would understand what I was about to say. My grandfather raised me. I began. My parents got divorced when I was 12, and neither of them really had their act together enough to be full-time parents. Dad moved to Arizona. Mom was dealing with her own stuff, and Grandpa just stepped up. He didn't have to. He was already in his 60s, already retired, could have been playing golf or traveling or doing whatever retired judges do, but he took me in, made sure I did my homework, taught me how to be a decent human being. And did that relationship continue into your adulthood? Lucas asked. Every single week, Sunday dinners were our thing. We'd play chess. He beat me probably 70% of the time, even when he was 86. We'd watch whatever game was on. We talk about everything from politics to philosophy to why the Phillies can never seem to get their act together. He was my best friend, honestly. The one person I could always count on to tell me the truth, even when I didn't want to hear it. And did you invite your ex-wife, Miss Coleman, to these dinners? Every single time for 5 years, I invited her. Every Sunday, I'd say, Grandpa wants us to come over. And she'd have an excuse. She was tired. She had plans. She had a headache. She had to work on her business. After the first year, Grandpa stopped asking if she was coming. He'd just set 2 places at the table instead of 3. Did that bother him? I paused, remembering. He never said it out loud. But yeah, I think it did. Grandpa was old school. Family was everything to him. The fact that my wife didn't care enough to show up, didn't care enough to even try to know him, I think that hurt. But he never complained. He just accepted it and moved on. Lucas nodded. Now, Miss Coleman testified that you prevented her from visiting your grandfather. Is that true? No, that's a complete lie. I begged her to come. I told her how much it would mean to him, how much it would mean to me. She just didn't care. And honestly, after a while, I stopped pushing because I realized Grandpa deserved better than someone who was only showing up because she felt obligated. Did you ever discuss your grandfather's wealth with Miss Coleman? This was important and I wanted to get it right. Never in the way she described. Yeah, I knew Grandpa had money. He owned properties. He'd been successful. It wasn't a secret. But I never sat around calculating what I might inherit someday. That's disgusting. The thought never even crossed my mind because I wasn't spending time with him for his money. I was spending time with him because I loved him. I saw Miranda look down at her hands. Good. She should feel ashamed. When did you learn about the full extent of your grandfather's estate? Lucas asked. At the reading of his will about 3 hours after his funeral, I thought I was going to get his chest set, maybe his watch. When the lawyer told me I was inheriting $30 million, I literally thought it was a mistake. I asked him to repeat it 3 times because I couldn't process it. And what was your reaction? I smiled, remembering that surreal moment in Bernie's office. Honestly, after the shock wore off, I laughed because 3 months earlier, Miranda had left me thinking I was a broke maintenance worker with no prospects. She left me for a guy with abs and no ambition because she thought that was a better bet. And then Grandpa left me everything, and I realized the universe has a sense of humor after all. A few people in the gallery chuckled. Even Judge Reynolds cracked a tiny smile. Did your grandfather have any relationship with Miss Coleman? Lucas asked. He tried. After the text messages, she sent him asking for money, which, by the way, I didn't know about until we pulled phone records for this case. He invited her to lunch 3 separate times. She never responded. He invited her to Christmas dinner 2 years in a row. Nothing. The only time she reached out to him was when she wanted him to invest in her skincare line, which I'm pretty sure never actually existed beyond some Pinterest boards and wishful thinking. And how did he feel about that? He told me, son, people who only call when they need something aren't family, they're salespeople. He wasn't angry about it, just disappointed. He'd seen enough people in his life try to use him that it didn't surprise him anymore. But I know it hurt him that my wife, the person I'd chosen to build a life with, couldn't even pretend to care about him unless there was money involved. Lucas walked back to his table and picked up a folder I recognized. This was the good stuff. The evidence that was going to seal this case shut tighter than a pickle jar. Mr. Whitmore, did your grandfather leave any instructions regarding his estate and his reasoning for his choices? He left a letter for me to read after he died. And what did that letter say? I pulled out the copy I'd been carrying in my jacket pocket, the one I'd read probably 50 times since that day in Bernie's office. My hands shook slightly as I unfolded it. He wrote, "You earned this inheritance not by being born into the family, not by sucking up to me, not by showing up at the end with flowers and fake tears. You earned it by having backbone. You showed up every Sunday for 20 years, even when you had better things to do. You called me every Wednesday evening, even when I know you were exhausted from work. You sat with me in the hospital during that pneumonia scare 3 years ago, and you never once asked about my will or my money. You came because you cared, and that's rarer than you think." My voice cracked a little, but I kept reading. "Everyone else in this family sees me as a bank account with a pulse. You saw me as Henry. That's worth more than all the money I made in my entire life. So, here's your inheritance. Everything I built, everything I saved, everything I invested. Use it wisely. Use it well. And remember who showed up when everyone else left." The courtroom was completely silent. I looked up and saw that even the stenographer had tears in her eyes. "That's the kind of man my grandfather was," I said. "He didn't leave me his money because I manipulated him or because I isolated him. He left it to me because I loved him, because I showed up. Because when he was sick and dying, I was the one holding his hand, not out there posting Instagram stories about living my best life." I looked directly at Miranda for the first time since I'd taken the stand. She was crying again, but this time I didn't feel sorry for her. Not even a little bit. She had 5 years to know him. I said 5 years to be part of our family. 5 years to show up for Sunday dinner or call him on his birthday or just ask how he was doing. She chose not to. And now she's mad that she doesn't get to cash in on a relationship she never wanted in the first place. That's not how inheritance works. That's not how family works. That's not how anything works. Lucas let that hang in the air for a moment before asking his final question. If you could say anything to your grandfather now, what would it be? I smiled, thinking about all those Sunday dinners, all those chess games, all those conversations. I'd say, thank you. Thank you for teaching me that integrity matters more than money. Thank you for showing me what real family looks like. Thank you for loving me even when I made stupid decisions like marrying someone who didn't deserve to know you. And thank you for being wise enough to leave your fortune to someone who loved you for who you were, not what you had. No further questions, Your Honor. Pike stood up for cross-examination, but his heart clearly wasn't in it anymore. He asked a few half-hearted questions about whether I'd known about the estate planning, whether Grandpa had ever seemed confused or easily influenced, whether I'd pressured him in any way. I answered honestly, no, and absolutely not. After about 5 minutes of getting nowhere, Pike sat down, looking defeated. Judge Reynolds leaned back in his chair, removed his glasses, and rubbed his eyes like he'd just witnessed something that had physically exhausted him. When he looked up, his expression was somewhere between disappointed and disgusted. I knew Henry Whitmore, the judge said quietly. Not well, but I knew him. We served on the bench together for several years, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that Henry Whitmore was one of the sharpest, most perceptive men I've ever met. The idea that anyone could manipulate him into doing anything he didn't want to do is laughable. He looked at Miranda with an expression that could have frozen nitrogen. Miss Coleman, I've been a judge for 27 years. I've seen every kind of case, every kind of claim, every kind of person. And this is one of the most frivolous, baseless lawsuits I've ever had the misfortune of presiding over. Oh, this was about to be good. Judge Reynolds adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. The kind of sound that meant someone was about to get absolutely destroyed in the most professional way possible. After reviewing the evidence presented today, he began, his voice carrying that particular tone of judicial authority mixed with barely concealed irritation. I find that the plaintiff's case is without merit. The evidence clearly shows that Mr. Marcus Whitmore maintained a consistent loving relationship with his grandfather for decades. The plaintiffs, however, demonstrated interest only when financial gain was involved. Miranda's face crumpled. Trent looked confused, like he was still trying to figure out what without merit meant. Miss Coleman, your testimony was contradicted by your own text messages, social media posts, and phone records. You committed perjury multiple times on this stand. Not only is your case dismissed with prejudice, meaning you cannot refile, but you will also be responsible for paying Mr. Whitmore's legal fees, which I imagine are substantial. Pike tried to stand. Your Honor, if we could sit down, Mr. Pike. I'm not finished. 3 weeks after the courtroom victory, Mrs. Henderson, Grandpa's elderly neighbor, showed up at my door holding a weathered envelope. Henry gave this to me years ago, she said softly. Told me to give it to you when the time was right. I think now's the time. Inside were letters Grandpa had written but never sent. My hands trembled as I read his elegant handwriting. Marcus, if she ever tries to come back, remember, forgiveness doesn't mean stupidity. You can forgive someone and still keep them out of your life. Another one read, love is showing up. You did. She didn't. That's all that matters. I framed that second letter and hung it above my desk in my new office. Yes, I finally moved out of that studio apartment. I took Grandpa's advice seriously, invested wisely, donated a chunk to veteran scholarships in his name, and started my own law firm. I called it Whitmore and Witt. The Witt part was intentional, and Grandpa would have loved it. 5 years later, life had become something I never thought possible during those dark days of eating ramen in my studio apartment with Abraham Lincoln staring down at me from the ceiling. The law firm was thriving beyond my wildest expectations. With 3 partners, 12 associates, and a reputation for taking cases that other firms wouldn't touch, we specialized in representing people who'd been betrayed, underestimated, or screwed over by someone they trusted. Turns out, there's no shortage of that particular brand of human garbage in the world, which meant business was unfortunately booming. I'd also gotten remarried, which surprised everyone, including myself. Her name was Sarah and she was everything Miranda wasn't. She was a high school English teacher who drove a sensible Toyota, packed her own lunches and thought manifesting abundance was something you did by working hard and being a decent person. Our first date was at a diner and when the check came, she insisted on splitting it. I knew right then I was going to marry her. We had a small wedding, family, close friends, and yes, I invited her to meet everyone in my life before I proposed because I'd learned that lesson the hard way. She got along with everyone because she was genuine, kind, and actually showed up when she said she would. Revolutionary concept. We lived in a beautiful house in the suburbs. Nothing too flashy because neither of us needed to prove anything to anyone. We had a dog named Chester who was dumb as a box of rocks, but had more loyalty in his furry body than Miranda had in her entire existence. Life was good, better than good. Life was exactly what Grandpa had wanted for me. Stable, happy, and built on a foundation of actual integrity rather than Instagram filters and protein shake philosophies. Then one Tuesday afternoon, I got a call from the mayor's office. Philadelphia was dedicating a new courthouse and they wanted to name it after Grandpa, the Henry Whitmore Justice Center. They asked if I'd speak at the dedication ceremony and obviously I said yes because how do you say no to honoring the man who gave you everything, including the wisdom to recognize trash disguised as treasure? The day of the dedication was perfect. Clear blue sky, crisp autumn air, the kind of day that makes you believe the universe occasionally gets things right. The new courthouse was beautiful, all glass and steel and modern architecture with Grandpa's name carved in stone above the entrance. Inside the main lobby hung a massive portrait of him in his judicial robes, looking exactly how I remembered him. Intelligent, dignified, and with just a hint of amusement in his eyes like he knew something you didn't. Hundreds of people showed up. Judges, lawyers, politicians, former clerks, people whose lives Grandpa had touched over his 8 decades of being awesome. I stood at the podium looking out at the crowd and felt Sarah squeeze my hand before I stepped up to speak. My grandfather, Henry Whitmore, taught me 2 fundamental things. I began, my voice echoing through the marble lobby. First, always tell the truth, even when it's inconvenient, especially when it's inconvenient, because lies have a way of catching up to you, usually in the most spectacular fashion possible. The crowd chuckled, and I saw several judges nodding knowingly. And second, I continued, unable to resist. Never date anyone who hashtags boss babe unironically. That's just asking for trouble. The laughter was genuine this time, the kind that comes from recognizing universal truth. Wrapped in humor. Sarah was shaking her head but smiling. In all seriousness, I said, my tone shifting. Grandpa taught me that character isn't what you do when people are watching. It's what you do when no one's looking. When there's no reward, when the only person who knows is you. He taught me that showing up matters, that consistency matters, that loving people isn't about grand gestures or social media posts. It's about being there week after week, year after year. Whether it's convenient or not. I looked up at his portrait and I swear those painted eyes were twinkling. He left me more than money. He left me a blueprint for how to be a decent human being in a world that doesn't always reward decency. He showed me that integrity is the only currency that actually appreciates over time. And he proved that the people who show up when you have nothing are worth more than all the people who show up when you have everything. I paused, gathering my thoughts for the final point I wanted to make. 5 years ago, I stood in a courtroom and watched someone try to claim they deserved a piece of his legacy without ever earning it. They thought family was about biology or marriage certificates or legal entitlement. But Grandpa knew better. Family is about showing up. It's about choice. It's about proving through your actions day after day that you actually give a damn. The crowd was silent now, hanging on every word. So today, as we dedicate this building in his honor, I want everyone who walks through these doors to remember what Henry Whitmore actually stood for. Not wealth or power or prestige, though he had all 3, but integrity, consistency, showing up, telling the truth even when it cost you. Being there for people who can't offer you anything in return except their love and respect. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years. And maybe, just maybe, being smart enough to recognize when someone's only interested in your bank account and not your Sunday dinners. That's wisdom worth more than $30 million. Trust me. After the ceremony, after the handshakes and the photographs and the speeches from people who'd worked with Grandpa, I found myself alone in front of his portrait. Sarah had taken Chester for a walk, giving me space for what she knew I needed to do. I stood there looking up at the painted version of the man who'd saved my life in more ways than one. And I whispered, "We won, Grandpa. They tried their best, but your plan worked perfectly. You taught me to keep receipts. And boy, did I keep them." I could almost hear his laugh. That dry chuckle he'd do when something amused him. "I'm doing good," I continued quietly. "The firm's helping people. I married someone who actually shows up, and I'm trying to be half the man you were. I think you'd be proud. At least I hope you would be." The portrait didn't answer obviously, but I didn't need it to. I knew. I walked out of the Henry Whitmore Justice Center into the afternoon sunshine where Sarah was waiting with Chester pulling on his leash trying to chase a pigeon. She smiled at me, the kind of smile that said she understood everything without me having to explain, and we headed home together. Behind me, carved in stone above the courthouse entrance, Grandpa's name would remind everyone who entered that justice, real justice, isn't just about laws and verdicts. It's about truth. It's about showing up. It's about choosing every single day to be a person of integrity, even when, especially when it would be easier not to. Love shows up, greed shows out, and sometimes karma wears a robe and a gavel. Grandpa would have loved that line.